Good way to tee it up. Thanks very much, John. Again, thank you for being with us today. And so that's, I guess, the first charge is recognize in terms of where there's opportunity for us. If you think about in terms of where our nodes are, in terms of that, one is certainly here in Greenville with East Carolina University. The other is down in Carteret County, where you have 3 research labs, all associated with the UNC universities in the Triangle. So it's interesting for us. We've got one on the very outlier areas of our region and one at the core. But it really is important to us, and we'll see a little bit of that in terms of the rationale for that as we go through some of these other presentations too. But it's not simply restricted to those. Sometimes it's the interaction between the region at large, or, as John mentioned, it's the companies that are in the region at large and their interaction with their universities, whether they be in their region or they're on the outskirts. Certainly, we have a number of our companies that tap into the brain power and the research triangle and bring that knowledge and bring that opportunity east, and we'd like to see more of that. More to come about that as we move through the agenda. Next is Ted Abernathy. Some of you know Ted. He spoke to us actually at our State of the Region a couple of years ago, did a great job. People responded very favorably to his presentation then, and I'll guarantee it's not the same presentation he gave 2 years ago. Ted is kind of one of us. He's an economic development guy, worked in local economic development, regional economic development, worked in association with the Research Triangle Park, Southern Growth Policies Board, and now he's back and on his own, and basically he has wheels and he travels. So we appreciate Ted stopping in with us on his way from Greensboro to Myrtle Beach. Thank you, Ted.
Thanks. So I'm actually on the way to Brunswick County. I'm staying in North Carolina, but that's okay. This morning I was in Greenville talking to a group of 700 CPAs on global economy. And the question there was, where were the global hotspots? And boy, that took a long time, and I didn't have a good answer for it. Today, the only question is North Carolina competitive? Yes. Is that enough? I don't know. Yeah, North Carolina, I'm born and raised here. I'm from Dallas, North Carolina, and I try to have audiences, when we talk about North Carolina, I try to step back a little and remember. And so these are my grandparents. Wade and Janora Abernathy on the right are my dad's parents, and Margaret and Roy, although everybody called him Hoot, Clemmer on the left, are my mom's parents. And I bring it up because they represent what the economy of North Carolina used to be. Now, to John's point, and I always like following John, my grandfather, Wade over here, said the best day of his life was the day he traded in Daisy, which was a mule, for a tractor. It was innovation. My mother, to this day, and my mom's still alive, living down in Gastonia, says the best day of her life was when the outhouse became the in-house. Again, innovation. My mother keeps asking me what the best day of my life is, and I default and say, birth of the kids or wife or, something. But I'm waiting for the technological things. I'm still waiting for that innovation for me, best day of my life. But my grandparents were, we're both sides of my family have been in North Carolina for multiple generations. The Abernathys for, I think, 8. But when they were born here, all 4 of them started out as farmers. They all had farms, and eventually all 4 became the first people in their family not to work on the farm, but to work in a job, and they were all textile workers. Bo Knit for 2 of them, and J.P. Stevens for 2 of them. And they were textile workers. They were North Carolina's manufacturers in the 50s. Everybody lived in a town of less than 3,000. Now, living in the towns, y'all have to give me a little rope on that one, because you couldn't see town from where we lived, but, it was down the road a ways. But Stanley and Dallas were small towns, and they were small, thriving towns. They were small town North Carolina. The highest grade anybody ever got to was 6th. Janora got to 6th grade, and that was considered pretty good education at that level. My parents got to high school. My brother and I got to college, first generation. But 6th grade was the skill set that people needed to be both good farmers and to be good workers at J.P. Stevens. And nobody ever had a passport, ever rode on an airplane. Margaret would have sooner died that day than got on an airplane. She didn't think that was even possible. She still don't believe anybody ever went to the moon. Nobody ever saw a mobile phone or a computer other than those big things in old movies, and the idea of owning a foreign car would never have occurred to anybody. The guys on the right owned Fords, the guys on the left owned Chevrolets, and on Sunday afternoon you could have a debate about such things. Some of you remember this. For those of you under 40 in the room, remember, what the hell is he talking about? The rest of you know exactly what I'm talking about. But that was North Carolina. That's where we were, right? So when you start with, are we competitive in North Carolina, you have to start by the fact that there's still a lot of people who that's what North Carolina economy is. Today, competitiveness is a global discussion. We don't get to choose who we compete with. And those of you who have your favorite college team understand that being competitive is different every year. You have different players, you have different people on your schedule. If you're ECU and you've got to go up and play Virginia Tech, that's a whole lot different than some of those people that NC State plays, I went to Carolina, so I can pick on both of you. And I had a son go to ECU and a daughter go to State, so I get to pick on them regularly. So let's talk about the economy for a minute. Let's rank it. Let's talk about the North Carolina economy. So we're going to grade it A, B, C, D, F. North Carolina economy, A's, B's, C's. Vote. D's, F's. Now you got to vote. Start over. Vote A, B, a few of you, C, there you go, most of you, that's what you're supposed to do, D, F. How about the national economy? The United States, A's, B's, C's, D's, more of you, F's. So what if I told you that, as an economist, the national economy is currently producing profits for corporations at its highest level in recorded history? That the stock market is at its highest level in recorded history, that exports are at the highest level in recorded history, that GDP output is at the highest level in recorded history, and there's about 40 of these. Economy never, ever, 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 ever in the history of America been any better on all of those indicators. Well, wait a minute, y'all gave it C's and D's. Now I know why you did, I got it. Because we're not producing much income growth and we're not producing as many jobs as we need, right? And it's different for different places and different people. But the fact is that by almost any legitimate measure, the economy is performing pretty well. And let's look at it as it relates to the world. By the way, this is the way I describe it to my friends. Yeah, it's pretty nice looking, but the problem is risk. The problem is uncertainty. We know that even if we think the economy is good today, even if you did, y'all were thinking, what's it going to be like next week or next month? And you don't have any confidence in it, right? That's risk, and risk creates fear, and fear creates morose behavior, which means you vote D's and F's. So some of the facts. This is global unemployment rates. The U.S. is over here on this side. We're at 6.7. When I had to turn this in, we just dropped to 6.3%. And yes, I know we can argue about how data is collected, and we'll do that a little later. European Union, 12% unemployment still. India, now remember fast growing, we're all worried about India, 10% unemployment. Canada's about ours. This is what's happened in the last 3 years. The U.S. rate has come down from 9.1 to the mid-6s. At the same time, Europe's has gone up. Canada has held about the same. U.S. economy has actually rebounded relatively strongly. Compared to the world. But here's the problem, is globally, by a lot of estimates, we have 1 billion fewer jobs than we need globally. We have 1 billion more people trying to get a job than there are jobs. And that underlies competitiveness in the economy. So that's one thing I want you to keep remembering. This is projected GDP growth for 2013 and 2014. You can see the U.S. here. We've gone from 1.9% last year to about 2.8%. Now, 1.9% last year is a little odd in that we had a sequestration at the beginning of the year, which if you had not sequestered, if you had not pulled in your government belt, this number would have been about 2.4. So, there are lots of good reasons for sequestration, so I'm not arguing that point, but I'm just saying that if this was 2.4 or 2.8, it wouldn't like a big jump. Really is a lot more of the same. China's dropped a little bit, India's up a little bit. They're the two up guys, but compared to double digit where they've been, they're still pretty low. So what you've got globally, in addition to the fact that you don't have quite enough jobs, is you have relatively slow growth all across the world. And yet, if you're European Union, yay, you think you're out of recession for the first time in 5 years, but you're yay out of recession at 1%. And you got elections this week who could actually throw you back into recession. So globally, you have global slowness and high competition for jobs globally. And those two factors overlay everything. Third factor that overlays everything is we're not growing not just the economy, but each other very much. These are fertility rates. If you're blue up here, you're below replacement rate. You're not actually having enough children to replace you, and you can see there's a lot of blue in the world. Blues and greens are real low. So the developed world, here's Japan, here's China, here's Russia, there's most of the EU, here's Brazil, Australia, us. We're not having near as many people, so we're growing slower. The only place that's growing fast is sub-Saharan Africa. And when you're trying to build consumption models, these guys aren't very middle class and they don't consume very much. And so globally, you don't have a demand drive that's making everything grow faster. Employment in the U.S. has grown the last 3 years faster than any 3 years since the 90s. Now, we dug a hole. Look at this big 9 million job hole that we got dug here. You might make an argument that these good years were actually bubbles to get to this hole. You could make that argument that they didn't actually, this isn't real, because all those construction jobs and bank jobs and other things were actually just setting yourself up for a pop in that bubble. So if you look at that, we've actually been flat since the 90s. Or just moderate. If you don't like the growth recently, you didn't like the growth then, they're about the same. So we've actually had a long-term U.S. lack of job growth. And that's sort of gone everywhere. The labor market currently has the most jobs in the last 6 years, but we don't think we have near enough. We still have 3 people unemployed for every job. And we're about back to the level that we started, but not with the growth that we needed to have. The real issue, though, for me, is the unevenness of all of this return. These are the 100 top metros in America. If you're orange, it means you're still below your pre-recession levels of jobs. And so you can see that, scattered all over the country, including in North Carolina, the 3 largest metros include Greensboro, which is still well below. You've got a lot of places that just aren't doing very well. And what you get in our economy today is a lot of unevenness. You get unevenness in people, you get unevenness in places. And so if there's a theme for me when I talk about the economy, it's how uneven everything is. This is the U.S. employment growth by sector. Over the last 12 months, the big sectors are business and professional services. Unfortunately, that includes part-time work, and transportation, trade, and utilities, which include a lot of retail sales jobs. Manufacturing, which we're going to talk about later, and so I'll get myself in trouble now with the next speaker. I love manufacturing. My grandparents were in manufacturing. There are 2 discussions of manufacturing. One is manufacturing output, and the other is manufacturing employment. They're not the same. Some of you have seen me do the presentation before where we talk about North Carolina losing 42% of its manufacturing jobs in the 2000s, and yet GDP for manufacturing went up. This is couple discussions. And so we lost 6 million or so jobs in the recession in manufacturing. We've gained back about 500,000 over the country. I love the number. It's got to go up. But expanding manufacturing doesn't mean everybody who ever had a manufacturing job before is going to have a new manufacturing job. And that's a discussion that next speaker will spend a lot of time on. But it's a hard discussion to have. It also doesn't mean manufacturing go back to every place it was before. In the South, over the last year, North Carolina is sort of middle of the road. Sorry for John's middle of the road, piling on. But Texas grew by 2.8%. Florida grew by 3%. Florida also lost the most during the recession, and so they've got a longer way to come back up. Everybody but Kentucky's on the way up. Kentucky's having a bit of trouble in eastern Kentucky because we're not buying coal. We like our shale gas a little better. And so eastern Kentucky's hit really hard. And so they're still down. But even Virginia, I was in Virginia doing a talk yesterday. Virginia, because of cuts in both the military and the federal government in Northern Virginia, and also consolidation of a lot of IT companies, really flat. But you can see sort of all over the place in the South, no real pattern. In North Carolina, numbers are up, and that getting to 1.6% is cause for yay, but just not a big yay, right? As my wife would say, yay, but not a big whoop, right? When you look at manufacturing jobs in the South, they're all over the place. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, just to say some places are losing, some places are gaining, and North Carolina is about flat. Sorry about this. Government jobs across the whole South. You want to win your bar bet for the day? Which state in the South is adding government jobs at the fastest rate? And the answer is Texas. Go ahead. You can win all your friends. You'll win a buck. I guarantee it on that one. Mostly, we're shedding government jobs, and we're doing it on purpose. These are public policy decisions to shed government jobs. Even the places that are gaining are really pretty small gains, except for Texas, and a lot of that's driven by population growth. Local government teachers, that kind of stuff. Leisure and hospitality growth, North Carolina growing fairly slow compared to everybody else. Virginia and West Virginia losing jobs, but some places 3, 4, 5% growth, and we're down here under 1%. And this is business and professional services. This is the area where we're doing the best. Some places actually, like Mississippi, Virginia, losing jobs, but North Carolina is gaining in that area. Problem with business professional services jobs, they tend to concentrate in the urban areas, and some of them tend to be part-time. Some of them are very high-end, some of them very low-end, but they tend to concentrate in the high-density areas. Here's what's happened to metros in North Carolina over the last 12 months. You can see that there are places that are winning and places that are losing. And John, we didn't say this already, but every slide is going to be on your website, so you can go back and go through them in great detail. But here's Wilmington leading the pack over here. This is Raleigh with them. This is Rocky Mount, Jacksonville, different places doing different things. But that's the nature of the message, is unevenness again. North Carolina, some places doing much better, some places not so much better. You look at our areas where we're growing, we're losing government jobs, but gaining jobs in business professional services, gaining jobs in construction, transportation and trade, some other stuff pretty flat. Wages across the country have been all over the place, but by and large, they've not been up. We're not really gaining much wealth for the average worker or the average family, and that's been true now for more than a decade. Per capita income in North Carolina, John has some of these on his charts, but we've never gotten all the way to the national average. We got close about right here around 2000, and since then it's widened. So as a native North Carolinian, I was taught we were the best at everything, right? That's sure. But we've never gotten to the point here. When you look at, these charts are United States, the 5th District, which is the Fed, we're part of the Richmond Fed, and North Carolina. Real personal income last year was our best year in a long time. Almost 1%, which doesn't sound like much, but it's the right direction. And if you look at real personal income the last year that it's available, this part of the country, orange is not good on this chart, orange and yellow. You can see this part of the country not doing very well, this part of the country doing very well, and North Carolina right in the middle again. Our GDP output per capita, as John showed you, we've never been to the national average. We got close, 2000 again, and spread back out. Now, part of these changes in the 2000s were due to losses in good jobs in manufacturing and financial services. There are always reasons, but every other state has a set of reasons also. Private building permits, the district went down, driven by Virginia's losses. We're up almost to the national average in building, so we've started back. There's some housing starts, there's some commercial stuff going on. Housing prices have rebounded in North Carolina. The only place still losing a little bit is Hickory. But you can see, the United States is at 12%, North Carolina at 8%. We didn't drop near as far as a lot of states, so our numbers won't be as high as they are. So when you measure competitiveness, you measure some people measure those individual things, and there are, how many indicators do you have? 38. So every group that measures competitiveness measures a group of indicators. They're all a little different. So I picked 5 of them that we're going to look at, 5 areas in a minute. First, are we competitive? Well, sometimes we don't think we're competitive as a country, and yet by every measure I can find, the U.S. on manufacturing is still competitive, and it's competitive because of a lot of reasons. And every one of these sort of indices has a group that they measure along the way. U.S. still legal and regulatory good, infrastructure getting bad, those kind of things. It's a matter of a lot of different things. The newest World Economic Forum came out. We were ranked 5th. I don't mind losing to Switzerland all that often. It's just not something I care about. And if you look at the list here, Finland, Singapore, these are smaller countries. Germany, really tough competitor, but over the last few months, Germany's prices have started climbing. And you're going to see some changes in that. This is Boston Consulting. They just moved us up to 2nd in the world competitiveness. So the U.S. is competitive. If you start hearing people say the U.S. isn't competitive, it's not true. We are still one of the most competitive places. One of the reasons is this is the Fortune 2000. Of the 2,000 biggest corporations in the country, we still have 564 of them in the U.S. That's a quarter of all the major companies in the world are still based here. We can have a nice discussion about what does based here mean, and I know, but if you look at everybody else's bubbles, this is the one you want. So let's drill down into North Carolina. When site selectors talk about competitiveness, these are this year's ratings: skilled labor, highway accessibilities, the cost of labor, cost things around occupancy and construction, ICT services, building sites, corporate tax rate, incentives, union profile, and energy availability and costs. Those are the top 10 this year. 8 or 9 of those show up in the top 10 every year. The other ones drop to 10, to 11, 12, something along that. But these are always near the top. So when Forbes looks at everybody in the country on their big set of 30 indicators, they decide North Carolina is number 4. When Site Selection looks at us, they decide North Carolina is number 2. When CNBC, they're the ones who diss us the most. They got us only 12th this year. When you look at top states for businesses, this is infrastructure, just drilling it down a little bit. 31st, the good road state. Some of you with gray hair remember this, right? 31st. We've been slipping in infrastructure. That's a real issue for us. When you look at America's top state for workforce, number 3. We're still good. We're still considered good in workforce. When you look at cost of doing business, 32nd. We're expensive in the South. South Carolina's 8, but Georgia's 28. That's another state John compares it to. Virginia's 38. So, we're not as cheap as Mississippi, who's 3, and Alabama, that's 6. We're a different model on that side. Not saying it's good. That's one of the weaker areas. Friendliness for business, 18th. Middle of the pack again. Area development looked at us. They rated us 5th. Chief executive looked at us. They rated us 3rd. All of these are multiple factor things. They're all different. Nobody advertises than anybody, best I remember. And so what you end up with the 5 most quoted comparatives, is only 3 states who score in the top 12 in all of those. That's North Carolina, Texas, and Georgia. Virginia gets 4 of the 5. South Carolina gets 3. Tennessee gets 3. South does pretty good. We're the place for business right now. But are we competitive? Of course we're competitive as a state. We have been competitive as a state since the 60s, and we've consistently won a lot of battles since then. This is the ALEC, which is a more conservative group, just ranked us 6th. This is the American Legislative Exchange Council. So both sides of the political spectrum or ideological spectrum rank us pretty well, and they rank them that way for different things. We can talk tax policy sometime if y'all like, because I got things that show us in the top 10 and things that show us in the bottom 10, and it depends on what you want to count, and we can all show those. In terms of industrial diversity, dark blue is good here. You can see that the diversity in what people used to refer to as the Piedmont Crescent, still strong. The diversity of the rest of the state, not so much. That's Jacksonville, by the way, and we sort of know what the industry is there, so that's why you get a red color there. We're not real good at exports. We need to be better. We've never put money and time into it. You can see here export growth over the last 3 years at 18%, some people doing better for us. Exports per capita, down here, somebody doing better. If the world's going to grow more different places, we need to put more investment into this activity. Our businesses need to sell to the places they can sell to. By the way, the top 10 manufacturing deals last couple months, I don't see us up there. So one of the things that make everybody sort of, morose around is that we don't see the big deals. I would tell you, you ought to look at the big deals. They're important, but also look at the other deals. We got some problems to be competitive, and some of those problems are really hard conundrum type problems. The first is urbanization, and I argue with groups that urbanization is the biggest problem facing the South. Because of the way we developed with lots of little towns, and remember that the West didn't have the we ride a horse to the courthouse in one day stuff, so we have all these counties and all these towns. Didn't develop that way. We've got an issue with urbanization. In the world, we're urbanizing. In America, this is percentage growth from places bigger than 1 million all the way down to micropolitans. The bigger you are, the faster you're growing. Not raw numbers, percentage-wise. The bigger you are, the faster you're growing. People are moving to big places. How many under 35s in the room? Anybody? A few of you. Big cities is where most of that cohort goes. So when you look at South Carolina, at who's growing, that if you're blue up here, you're growing fast. So here you are in Charleston, and this is Myrtle Beach in Brunswick County. You can see the Raleigh area and the Charlotte area. One of the issues the East has, the tan areas out here are places that are shrinking. Population loss. This is loss between 2010 and 2013. We're not alone. Look at all the population loss here and all the in America, about half our counties are losing population these days. This is an urbanization trend, and it's hard because if I ask you where should you put your resources, if you're a state and you're going to have limited resources, should you try to spread it out? Should you try to concentrate it for efficient? What should you do? This is the public policy issue that's just, and it's not North Carolina, it's everybody in the South is fighting with this issue. You can see that in South Carolina, but if I go to Virginia, all the growth is in Northern Virginia or Norfolk area or some in Richmond. If I go to Tennessee, it's all in Nashville or Knoxville. This is one of our big issues. This is population loss and gains. And you can see the North Carolina blow up, that we have this as a real public policy issue that we have to deal with. And we're not alone. If you're colored on this map, if you're either red or blue or purple, you've lost population. This is 2004, 2007, and 2010, 2013, but by and large, huge parts of the U.S., mostly rural parts, are starting to depopulate. Even more are losing jobs when people are commuting to jobs in more concentrated areas. That creates public policy issues. The second big public policy issue, and John hit on it in his opening remarks, is a skills shortage. And John talked about education levels, and I'll be controversial and say I'm less concerned about education levels than I'm concerned about skill levels. We can have a lifelong debate about that. But when I graduated high school, 17% of people had a BA, and when my daughter graduated, 30% had a BA. And that was who you're competing with. The bar is rising dramatically. And we're not generating jobs in the middle. In the U.S., since the mid-'80s, we've generated lots of jobs at the bottom end and many even more jobs at the high end, and we've lost jobs, a lot of jobs in the middle. To get from here to there, you have to have skills. And if you don't have skills, if we can't get people to accumulate skills along the way, they're not going to be able to have a middle-class lifestyle. I'm going to skip that one, go to this one. This, I want you to know, it says on the bottom, there's no source, I made it up. Okay, so I'm just saying. Here's my concern. When I sit back and wonder about things, what keeps you awake at night, my concern is that what we need in the business world today with abilities, attitudes, skill levels, and intelligence of employers is going up faster than our ability to do that with our workforce. We're not able to educate them, raise their IQ, and raise their attitudes as fast as we need them to meet our demands. How many people in the room have openings right now for jobs? Raise your hand. And how many of you think you're going to have some issues finding people? All of you, right? When we go out and talk to them, this is an issue. So for me, the gap's widening, and I think that's a major issue. Tyler Cowen wrote a book recently called Average is Over. We don't value average anymore. We used to want everybody to be at the norm, right? Now we value high end and we don't value the average. Technology is still an issue. A lot of my friends talk about whether robots are helping or hurting jobs or whatever. We're technologically moving forward. The internet, a lot of people in this room remember the early 90s. We didn't have the internet in the early 90s. It's that quick. And we're at the beginning of that technological shift. And that shift in energy and materials and communication and health is going to profoundly change every industry that every single one of you are involved in, whether it's local government or whether it's education system or whether it's manufacturing or service. Oops. This is the great chart that came out recently on the odds and probability that a robot would end your job in the next 20 years. This is Economist, 50-50, that I'll be up here in 10 years. John, you probably have a little robot. There'll be a little robot running around stage talking about this stuff. When we talk about the future, looking at it, there's going to be more automation. There's going to be more highly skilled people and less low skilled people. Everybody, both manufacturers and others, are going to be on core functions. Global is going to be, the lines get erased for business as we move forward. You're going to build alliances and you're going to treat wholesale different. We're going from a world of mass production to mass customization where large companies aren't rewarded for being large. They're rewarded for being fast and flexible. And we're going at a time where full-time employment is starting to take a back seat to just-in-time temporary talent. We want to hire the people to have what we want them to have, when we want them to have them, and we don't want them the rest of the time. For North Carolina to be competitive, it's not hard to know in economic development what you need. Businesses will tell you they want shovel-ready sites, ready to go tomorrow. Buildings and sites ready to go. They want a surrounding business ecosystem that works. They want logistical advantages for their company. They need specific, site-specific, real incentives, and they need a workforce that'll help them be competitive. We know all of that. That is not new, and it is not different. And we know all this. I didn't tell you anything you didn't know today, but economically, the question simply is, what do you do about it? Or in our office, it's the so what question. Okay, we just know all that stuff. We know all the stuff John said you need to do. Next speakers are going to talk about things we need to do. The question is, will we do it? So can we create the to-do list that we move ourselves from here to there? In our office, we talk all the time about what is your current reality? How do you understand it? And where do you want to be? But you can't just sort of draw a line. You have to figure out what's changing in the world. What's the competition doing? What context are you in? You have to decide specifically what it is you want to do, a list of intentional things. People who are competitive in the world today, places, are intentional about what they do. And you have to have the leadership that actually lets you do it. Something that the East Region has been very successful in over the years is taking ideas and converting them into action. And so I live by this motto every day: you do what you can with what you have where you are. And I think that as you're trying to be competitive in North Carolina, tomorrow the North Carolina budget doesn't double. Tomorrow, places that have been having issues don't get well. And urban areas have to compete against even better urban areas other places. So you spend your time doing what you can. And if we want to be competitive in North Carolina, you maximize the strengths, you address the weaknesses, and you move forward from there. But right now, we're in pretty good shape. How can we make it better? Thank you, John. Questions? Ask a hard one. Come on, ask a hard question. I'm happy to go to break. Back up here. Yes, sir. Yep. Yes, I'm sorry.
It does. You talked about states making hard decisions about where to place their resources. It seems to me that there's some validity to the statement that if there is a state that has very thriving central part but lagging back on either side, that in the end that's going to be worse than trying to spread the resources out a little bit and grow the economies of the non-productive sides. What is your take on that, Ted?
So my take is public policy is almost never about finding an answer and always about making a choice. And I tell people that all the time. There is no aha out there that I can save money, I can grow my urban regions as fast as I want, and I can spread the wealth to everybody else in every place. If if we knew that, then we wouldn't be here. We'd be out, touting the book and making zillions of dollars. So there's a choice that has to be made, and I think the problem for us is that in the South, our development patterns are just so different. If you go west, and Texas is a great example. Texas has the lowest percentage of rural population in the whole South, unless you count Maryland, and my wife's from Maryland, and we've been having debate since I met her 35 years ago whether or not it's in the South. But anyway, come on, they have Lithuanian restaurants and no sweet tea. It's no way it can be true, but can't be true, but I still haven't won the argument. I'm still fighting the good fight. Texas is huge cities, 3 of the top 10 in the country, with some bigger cities sort of outside, but then cow, oil well, cow, big city. They don't have to spread stuff out. It's a huge advantage, along with natural resources and a bunch of other things. They have a huge advantage in that they don't have to try to do this. The Northeast all grew together. There's not much rural area there, and if there is, it's because they preserved it to be rural. Western New Jersey is supposed to look like that, which is, if you haven't been to Western New Jersey, is sort of, beautiful rural countrysides, but nobody wants anything else. In the South, we have all of these counties and towns that everybody thinks everybody could grow. And from a policy standpoint, it's Ted Abernathy version. Governor Holshouser, when he was governor, had the first node model of economic development. He didn't get it through because he was a Republican and we had Democratic, and that didn't work way back then. Great guy, but he thought that everybody ought to be able to live within 30 minutes of a job. That you needed to be within 30 minutes of shopping, you needed to be within 30 minutes of a job, you needed to be 30 minutes of a hospital, whatever, but that you erased all the county lines when you were doing that, and the city lines. I still adhere that that's a proper way of doing it. For all the county managers in the room, I'm sorry, I understand this. And remember, I'm from Dallas, North Carolina. If you've been to Dallas, the spillover from Charlotte doesn't look all that good from Dallas. Just doesn't. But there's not enough money on earth to spread jobs everywhere. They're just not doing it. And young people today, millennials, are choosing more and more not to live anywhere they could because there's an internet, but to some place that has everything they want, which tends to be more and more dense urban core. And it's not us. It's happening in Europe, it's happening in China, it's happening in Brazil, it's happening everywhere. So I think it's the public policy issue of our time. I think that and the fact that our skills sets are going up and down are the two issues that we should spend the most time on. John's comments about trying to grow and trying to connect rural to urban, I think are the smart moves. We're always going to need food and energy and water and other issues where rural areas, more rural, and I'm not talking, sort of the town down the street, I'm talking about rural, where they're going to have to connect with urban. We're always going to have that, but we haven't been intentional about those connections, and I think that's what we're going to have to do. We have to think about it differently. There's no 2-lane road that will take you out far enough and wide enough to make everybody want to be out there. It's just not on the way to places. So, other questions? Yes, ma'am?
So why did the policy of the last 20 to 30 years make us top 3 in the country?
We ended up being top 3 in the country because of a lot of things that we have done over a long period of time. So North Carolina, for a long time, was the best state around, or one of the best states for infrastructure. We built a road network, and a lot of the infrastructure, once you did it, it was there for a while. We built a community college system that trained people faster and sooner and better than almost anybody else. Science and Tech Board, first in the country. Biotech Center, first in the country. Community College Training Program, first in the country. MCNC, first of its type. We were ahead of a lot of things that laid a deep foundation pretty broadly, and that helped. Intentional actions like Research Triangle Park, like a university system, like what was going on in Charlotte by the private sector with acquisitions and finance and other things. Some of those things happened well and serendipitously. North Carolina also has forever had great mountains and great beaches and tourism attractions that worked for it, and that stayed there. It's long term. So there were a lot of seeds that went in to build us into a good place. We were ahead of the game. We were progressive in the sense that we were looking forward, and we were very, very good at attracting manufacturing jobs that paid people broadly. And I'm not talking about the highest wages, but it went all across the state. Where we ran into trouble is when manufacturing changed, North Carolina didn't anticipate the change and get out in front of it. We were running from behind instead of running ahead at that point. And that's why I think a lot of people now are trying to look out. Unfortunately, the cycles are shorter, so you can't look out 25 years anymore. You look at about 10 years and try to catch up. But I think that's part of the issue. We're still a state where more people are, we're one of the states in the country where so many people are trying to move in because they still like the balance in our state, the beauty in our state, the opportunity in our state. So are we competitive? Absolutely. Is that guaranteed going forward? No. A lot of places, Buffalo was, I hope nobody's from Buffalo. Buffalo was terribly competitive at one time. Toledo was terribly competitive at one time. You have to keep going forward and keep investing toward the future. And we did a good job of that in the past. Whether or not we do that in the future, we'll see. I hope all of y'all will help people decide to do that. So. Anything else? Yes, sir. Yep, that's you. Oh, microphone, that's right. I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to do that. Yeah.
The technological gap that you mentioned, which I kind of like to call the more of a technological revolution, sort of like the Industrial Revolution. You said we're at the front end, so I noticed in the slide you had, it went through kind of quickly, but I think it moved from very minimal up to, I think it was 84%.
Yep.
By conventional wisdom, as we approach,
Yeah.
By conventional wisdom, as we approach 100%, that should eventually stabilize. And I guess my question is, do you feel like the displacement of labor will ever catch up as kind of society adjusts and evolves, or are we doomed to be replaced?
That's a great question. So this is the robot question, right? So for everybody in the room over the age of 50, you don't get to count. Everybody in the room over the age of 50, I want you to think back to what robots were going to do to our lives when we were kids. They were going to make it easy, right? We were going to get to work 10 to 20 hours a week, and the robots were going to do everything else, and our life was going to be simple, right? Remember all that? So the answer to your question is yes, we will normalize as we get to some point. But that's one technology. Technology is accelerating, not slowing down. So the changes will be different. And if we knew what they were, then we should invest today. But, who in here is in higher education? Raise your hand. I knew it would be in it. So anybody think higher education is going to be exactly the same in 10 years? Now, some of you, we could probably get you to say it's not going to change as much as those people think it is, right? Okay, I got that, because I'm doing a big project in higher education. Health is going to change dramatically. Transportation is going to change dramatically. Communication is going to change. All of those things are going to change. If I get up here in 10 years, the number of things during your day that are going to be connected to sensors and internet changes are going to be so ridiculous that we won't even think about things the same way. I tell groups to do this all the time. Take yourself back 20 years and describe your day, and get up today and start checking off the things that would be the same. And they're not. I mean, everything, including the alarm clock's different. The shower's different. Everything's different. So the technological change is going to normalize because we're going to get used to the pace. Pace of change is not going to leave us behind as much because we're going to get used to the pace. Part of that is our next generation. The digital generation is much more used to that. But will we generate enough jobs for everybody to have one? So how many people here think they work fewer hours than they used to? Right, nobody, right? So we probably have enough labor. We just have to figure out how much that labor is worth and where it goes in. So there are going to be some changes. I'm a Jetsons guy, I mean, Mighty Mouse and the Jetsons were my guys, Johnny Quest. But the Jetsons, I mean, you can get the robot now. You can get the treadmill now. You can't get the little flying car, which is a shame, but we're getting there. I mean, technologically, things are easier, but we've tried to make things harder. And if you want to think one day, just for fun one day, I recommend this on a beach, sitting there looking at a wave with a cold beverage. Think about your life and your grandparents' life, and what was their norm and what is your norm, and what could you live on if that was your norm? And how's life different? Is it better? Of course it's better. People born now are going to live 20 years longer than people born when my parents were born. So we're buying more years, we're buying more stuff, we're buying more whatever, but it's going to change and it's going to get better. And on that, I'm going to stop. Thank you.